Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 12. Given the way things had been going for me over the past dozen hours or so, when I stepped from the shower, I clothed myself with older items to which I had no particular emotional attachments. This resulted in my wearing a pair of canvas slacks, a white single-pocket t-shirt, and a blue nylon windbreaker over it. I did keep my boots, and even pulled on an old Orontius Orioles baseball cap. Beach, who had showed up at my place dressed in clean, well-pressed corporate casuals, shook his head at my appearance. Apathetic Chaucers can be rather boring. Hey, I've had the best part of my wardrobe shot up or bled on today. I shoved my hands in my pockets of my jacket as we propped the dented door to my apartment up. Do you think Miss Wickersham will be safe in there? Now that you've left, probably. Not feeling inclined toward being a whetstone for Beach's wit, and being a bit concerned about his reaction if I didn't laugh at one of his jokes, I sank into a sullen mood and wandered in his wake toward the Cybertronic building. A lot of different things ran through my mind as we walked, but I couldn't summon enough concentration to sort them out. As if he'd read my mind, Beach dropped back and matched his pace to mine. Most of your operations have soft penetrations and scouting missions, right? I nodded, except when I was sent with an Attila named Nebuchadnezzar to deal with some gang pilfering from one of our warehouses. That got a bit nasty, but Nebu used his AR-3K to pretty good effect. Beach's eyes narrowed. That was an action against the Moon Lions. 6 months ago, they were creating a spoilage problem with Warehouse 1045 down in Helicon Deuce. I reviewed that operation. You got 3 with your knife. I shook my head. 2. I got the 3rd with my bare hands. Beach nodded appreciatively. You shoot very well, but you don't use a gun. Why not? Don't want to be dependent on it. Guns jam, ammo runs out, but not many throwing knives can turn a crowd back. Beach settled a heavy hand on the back of my neck. Now what's the real reason you don't carry a gun? Having guns on me didn't stop me from becoming a candidate for Cybertronic's fitness regimen, but it might have delayed it. I looked over at him. What do you mean? How'd you die? My back was broken, my skull crushed. I know that, Dent. Then why did you ask? What were the circumstances behind your death? I shook my head as we headed up to the 2nd level of the Ptolemaeus district. I don't know. You don't know? No, I don't know. I don't feel like dwelling on a morbid subject like that. Beach's hands tightened slightly. And you watch your funeral video records just for the fun of it? I consider it performance art. Why don't you want to know how you died? Beach shook his head. Most Chaucers asked for that information immediately and figure they'll go out and avenge themselves. That's why those records aren't available for a year after you join us. By then you've been judged able to handle it, or you've been deactivated. I growled, and a steam shunt valve on the street hissed sympathetically. I don't want to know how I died because I died. I don't want to repeat that mistake. Oh, you just assume you were stupid, do you? I died, didn't I? Beach spun me around and slammed me up against the wall. His right fist came up and in at my head, but I'd already begun to twist free of his grip on my shoulder. I ducked away from the blow and drove my right fist into his ribs. He grunted with pain and bounced back, but my quick leg sweep banged his ankles together and he went down. I danced in at him, but he slapped the Ferrocrete sidewalk 3 times with his bare hand, and I backed off. What's the big idea? He slowly stood up and brushed himself off. The idea was to show you that you have skills and reactions that we could not give you. We built upon what you were. We didn't start with a tabula rasa, and we don't recruit stupid people. For all you know, you were a free marine on Venus who died from wounds sustained when you fought off a Bauhaus raid. Or I could have walked into an ambush. Or you could have died of smoke inhalation and sustained injuries from falling downstairs while saving children from a burning building. Or I could have been surprised by a jealous husband and killed with my pants down around my ankles. I poked a finger at him. The bottom line is I died, and I'm not going to do that again. Nice sentiment, Dent, but the things you're involved with now make that a long-odds proposition. But you said heretics make good targets. They do, but the other things that you'll run into don't. I prefer dealing with them when I'm on the blunt end of an SR 3500 rifle, with them in my scope and finger on the trigger. Beach watched me for a reaction, so I didn't give him one. I consider myself very efficient at what I do, and I don't mind close combat, but the Legion's foot soldiers are the sort of things that rightfully inhabit nightmares. We walked on, and I waited until the crowd thinned around us before asking him a question. Have you ever seen a Nephirite? With my own eyes, no. I've seen video of what appeared to be Nephirites on Venus and Mars, and then what you saw during your first fugue. How big are they? 4 meters. That would dwarf Ash or Nebu. Not everything they have is that big, but a lot of it is incredibly hideous. They appear to reanimate our dead and turn renegades and deserters into Necromutants and Centurions. Razoids are huge things, barely sentient, and Ezagurs are centauroid death beasts. None of them appear to feel pain in any sort of way we do. They take a lot of killing. But they do die, right? Sure, but seldom alone. Beach shook his head. Better to be killed by them than be a prize for which they are fighting, like this Coven woman. Agreed. He led me into a musty bookstore and down rickety stairs to the basement. Back in the science fiction ghetto, we tugged on a book wedged on a head-high shelf, and the wall retracted. Lasers scanned both of us, then let us pass. Behind us, the wall closed again. We wandered through UV-blazed corridors to the Cybertronic tower. Isn't it risky using a book like that to open one of these doorways? It was written by a science fiction writer who styled himself a literary genius. The late 20th century was chock full of them. One even retreated to France because he figured the French could truly understand him. Few enough people read these days, the chances were poor that anyone would pick an obscure, self-indulgent, self-important books to read. I nodded. His books were in the minority on the shelf there. What is in demand is what gets supplied. We walked into the art annex of Cybertronic Tower and past the blonde male version of Miss Wickersham. Once inside art, we split up. But when I went sub-real on the couch in Andy's office, I saw Beach waiting for me in Carl's office. Evening, Carl.
Good. Now that you are here, we can bring you up to date on what's happened to Miss Coven.
I nodded. One thing I wanted to check first. When you modified my navigation program, you put in a subroutine that sends out a distress call when I fugue, right? The sphere and cylinder man nodded.
It monitors your vital signs and calls for aid if your life is in jeopardy. You went into convulsions almost immediately upon entering your fugue state. Since you were in a known, relatively safe environment, the program kept you there, then sent for assistance.
It was not a breach of trust, Rex. but a matter of concern for your safety. Just thought I'd check. Beach nodded at the humanoid construct.
Carl, what about the Coven woman being taken? One moment.
I looked at Beach. You call him Carl too?
For the Clawsweets.
Sure. You? Yeah, but for young. We both smiled in appreciation at each other, then returned our attention to Carl. With his right index finger, he drew a box in the air, and its outline glowed green neon. Black and white static filled it, then dissolved into an unsteady video feed that moved as if the camera person were running. The images appeared familiar to me because they had been shot in the safe house where Lorraine had been held.
A dozen armed individuals hit this location approximately 2 hours ago. The safe house was caught at the end of a shift. The invaders posed as their relief crew and took others unawares. This video was taken by one of our people who works in concert with a capital rescue squad.
The video started in the back of the building and took us down a corridor with blood smeared on the floor and low on the walls. The trail curved off into a side chamber where a dead body lay. The videographer continued his journey into the building, following a trail of spent shells and bullet holes. At the bottom of some stairs, 2 more guards lay in a pool of blood and entrails. The videographer crouched, and in the half-light I saw bloody footprints glistening on the stairway, coming up in all directions. One of the 3 sets of footprints I assumed belonged to Lorraine. The fact that her footprints were irregular and highly smeared, I decided she came along reluctantly and might have even fought her captors. Given that putting up resistance was more of a reaction than I'd seen from her in the initial interview, I took it as a good sign. Carl froze the picture on another pair of dead bodies.
Capital operatives did manage to call out before they were killed.
Total casualties for the operation? Asked Beach.
At this facility, 5 died. 2 were in critical condition, and one of those will die. And the other will be crippled for life. Casualties from the other side are unknown at this point.
I frowned. The way you phrase that, there is another site where there was difficulty? Carl nodded. The picture shifted to a scene of a traffic accident. Mangled metal and shattered plastic made it difficult to figure out what had hit what. But if forced to make a guess, I would have said a black Puma coupe, going flat out, hit head-on with a Yosemite family wagon. Bodies lay scattered amid the debris, and a thin spread of white smoke drifted up from the foam-covered wreckage. Beyond the fire trucks, I saw an ambulance and a small body being loaded onto it.
The girl in the ambulance was the only survivor of a family of 7. She said her father screamed about being blind before he swerved into oncoming traffic. The men in the Puma were a capital response team in pursuit of what was taken to be the raiders' vehicle. They never had a chance.
I raised an eyebrow. That wasn't an accident? Beach answered me. Those who have given themselves over to the Dark Legion are rewarded for their devotion. They sometimes possess what they call dark gifts. One of those is the ability to inflict blindness on a victim. But my fugue led me to believe that the snatch was arranged as an Imperial operation. There was no mention of heretics being involved. Carl nodded slowly.
It very well could be whoever coordinated the attack directed the escape route through the particular intersection so any cars could be taken care of. The Imperial operatives may not have known they had help from heretics. I meant that the probability of their knowledge is less than 5%.
How do you figure that?
We just picked up a capital alert that identifies some of the raiders. They were all in units that saw action against Dark Legion forces on Mars.
Beach leaned forward in his chair. Were they corrupted?
Unlikely.
I confirmed Carl's speculation. Ragathol did mention controlling them. I looked at Carl. Does Capital know this is an Imperial operation yet?
Apparently not. The raiders who had been identified worked as freelancers.
I smiled. Good. Then that means we have a chance to get Lorraine before Capital does. Carl's head came up.
Why would we want to do that?
Now I'm confused, Carl. I stared hard at him. I did some thinking before I fugued, and I've made a connection between Lorraine Coven and my past. I knew her. She's the sister of the wife of the man who eulogized me.
Ah, then you wish to start integrating your past with your present?
No, I shook my head. I'm as adamant to keep the two things separate as I was in the past. What I do want to do is start fighting against the Dark Legion. You know from my information dumps, everything I've experienced in those fugue states. But you don't know how they've felt. Toward the end of the first one, I had begun to identify with Ragathal's overlord. From the start of the second, I was one with him.
Which is why we believe your body reacted so violently from the start of that fugue.
Well, my physical reaction produced physical results that I could clean up. What I can't clean up is my mind. I still know what it felt like to be inside the mind of an apostle of the Dark Legion. I am tainted in that I know how he would react. I know what he likes and what he hates. I know what gives him pleasure and causes him pain. I know how it feels to be used by the Dark Legion. I pointed at the image of the car wreck. You notice that the heretics blinded some hapless boob who happened to be driving his family somewhere. They deliberately chose to use a tool that would do maximum damage, both to their target and to humanity as a whole. That tragedy, which will doubtless be painted as reckless drivers in a hot Puma slamming into a family, will erode hope with despair. Not only did it stop the capital pursuit, but it damages everyone who hears about it. My subreal hand tapped my subreal chest. I don't need to know who I was to be hurt by that action, and I don't have to be who I was to want to react to it. I might be an agent of Cybertronic, but I still possess some humanity. The fact that I once knew Lorraine Coven means her case attracts my attention. The fact that I'm human means I want to snatch her away from the Dark Legion and visit a bit of pain back on them. Beach wore a smug expression that I didn't like, and Carl made notes before looking up at me.
How would you suggest we go about this rescue? We don't even know where she is.
Start by getting every nanosecond of video from the accident from any and all sources available. Analyze it and isolate everyone in it. Sort them out by length of time they are there, eliminating those who arrive late or leave before the ambulance takes the girl away. After that, study the individuals alone, and then in whatever groups they appear to form. Check them for appearances of ecstasy or fascination with the accident. Pay special attention to those who seem to have knowledge of exactly how it happened. I narrowed my eyes. A heretic is going to be like a pyromaniac. He'll get a thrill from watching the aftermath of what he caused. Rank very high anyone who seems anxious to talk to the security forces. Tap the security forces for names and addresses of the witnesses. Then compile dossiers on all of the likely folks and place them under surveillance. Research their known associates, and, eventually, we'll get back to someone in the first or second level of Imperial security. Lorraine won't be far from him, and is probably being held in some satellite facility near the spaceport for easy transport to Mars. And working backward from the capital identifications of freelancers will probably work. But I expect those freelancers to be dead before they're paid off, so they'll be useless. Beach clapped his hands. Bravo, Rex. That was an excellent start. I take it you see others that need to be done at this point? He nodded. Imperial's facility, at least the sort you suspect, will hold Coven.
are often built on one of 3 or 4 different floor plans. We can begin an assault analysis for those plans to determine the resources necessary to crack one open. Its actual location will affect the rescue operation in terms of ingress and egress, response times and perimeter isolation, but little more. We can be a jump ahead of ourselves if we start looking at what we need early. We can even begin to procure materials before finalizing our plan. You're using the term "we" rather freely there. You want a piece of this operation? Beach nodded. You'll need an assault coordinator. I'll take the job if it's open. It's filled now. I looked over at Carl. You can handle the computer stuff, right?
I've taken the liberty of beginning the isolation and analysis of the videos already. We can manage that and the planning of the theoretical raid on an Imperial facility before we need corporate clearance. Anything much beyond that would be premature.
Does premature include me rounding up some freelancers for this operation? I started to tick points off on my fingers. We want freelancers for plausible deniability. We want particular freelancers because they've seen Coven before. If I get hit, they can still identify her and extract her. We want those same freelancers because they've had experience fighting Dark Legion heretics before. And if there are any involved in keeping Lorraine captive, their experience might prove very helpful. Carl started to nod, but Beach cut him off.
If we consider them outside consultants from our planning of this theoretical raid, we hire them for their expertise, not action. That we can do.
The construct smiled.
Well done, Coral. You outmaneuvered the regulations very adroitly.
Coming from you, that's high praise. I smiled. Okay then. Things have a weak green light. I'll go find Pam and Lane and get their crew together. Once we have a location and a plan to take it, we can get clearance to get Lorraine back. Beach shook his head.
Rygatha will not be pleased.
No, he won't. Nor will his master. I smiled in spite of myself. And even though I'll pay quite a price for it, that's not a show I want to miss. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 12, End.